Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Pei, Perek Zayin, Halacha Vav, and Halacha Zayin. We're going to be learning Daf Samach Vav. We left off on Daf Samach Vav, Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid, by the new Mishnah, by Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Vav will start speaking about a kerem that contains nothing other than oilulis. And we'll have a machlokes tanoim, whether the aniyim still have the right in the oilulis, or whether we say that in such a scenario there is no obligation to leave oilulis at all, because there is nothing that he's harvesting for himself if he were to do so. One thing becomes clear in this first topic, that both tanoim will hold that aniyim have no claim to the oilulis prior to the time of the harvest, as we'll see inside the sugya. Mishnah Zayin, which is also going to be a Daf Samach Vav Amid Aleph, will discuss how are we to treat oilulis in a kerem that was consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash that became hegdish. And actually, we're going to go. The Mishnah will also go a little bit to Dinei Shikha in a kerem bechlal, but the Gemara is going to go back to the first topic in the Mishnah, and that will be when you have a vineyard that was consecrated, and whether the new growth, the growth that happens after the consecration, is in itself hegdish, and that's going to be directly tied into a phenomenal sugya that we have in Masechtas Pesachim. The Mishnah writes over there that there were shisha devarim that also anshe Yerichai al shloisha michu b'yadam v'al shloisha loy michu b'yadam, and the first of the 3 that the Mishnah enumerates that the Chachamim were upset with the behavior of Anshe Richai was in a scenario, B'Lashon HaMishnah, that they were matirin begamziyoi shel hegdish, as we'll speak out. It's very common that certain trees are pruned once in a while, especially bigger trees like carob trees, like sycamore trees. They were pruned once in 7 years. There was a time, as we'll see why it happened, that Anshe Yerichai, right after the pruning of those trees, were magdish those trees. 7 years later, they pruned it again. In other words, the growth that they cut off was that which happened after the trees were already consecrated, and they were matir to use it for the private use. And the Chachamim were upset with them. And we're going to learn back and forth what was their heter, why were the Chachamim upset, and we'll see how this ties into our Mishnah regarding oilulis from a kerem that was already consecrated. And that is going to lead us into a greater topic, that when someone is magdish, of course, if they are explicitly being magdish, the product, in this case, the trees and the fruits, the trees and the additional growths, if that is what they said, all of it is hegdish without doubt. What happens if they did not explicitly say what, or if they are excluding anything, like Bechal, when a person is magdish a fruit tree, without specifying that he's also being magdish the fruits that will grow later, whether they are hegdish, whether they're not hegdish, they are gedulei hegdish. This will be the sugya that we'll have on Daf Samach Vav on the bottom, on Daf Samach Vav Amid Beis, toward the whole Amid. And without any further ado, Chavra, let's go right in. Samach Vav Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top, says the Mishnah. Kerem shukulei oilulis. So you have a vineyard, and for whatever reason, the entire harvest is underdeveloped clusters. As we learned above, there's no katef, there's no native, right? There's no shoulders, there's no drippings, all the other additional prerequisites that we learned in the Gemara. In other words, they are bona fide oilulis, but it's all of them. Here's the machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, that they belong to the Balabais. Rabbi Akiva Oimer, that even in the scenario, the Torah says that the oilulis belong, la'aniyim, they belong to the poor. The Mishnah itself will record the behind the sources of both of these Tanoim. So, Rabbi Eliezer, and he's quoting a pasuk in Parshas Ki Seitzei. And if you want to read the pasuk, if you have the Torah or Hashalim, The pasuk reads, "Ki siftzod karmacha." When you are harvesting your vineyard, the word siftzod is the word that's used in the Holy Tongue specifically for a kerem. Loisa oilel acharecha. That's the words. Loisa oilel acharecha laged layosem balamona yihiyah. Says Rabbi Eliezer that aim that ki siftzod, when you are harvesting, the Torah then says, don't take off the oilless, which implies that in ein batzid, if there's nothing to harvest other than the oilless, if that is all there is, in other words, if you're going to read the oilless, there won't be a batzid. If ein batzid is minayin oilless, then why would there be oilless? There is no source for oilless. The pasuk is not speaking about such a scenario as the Mara Fulda, 7 lines from the top of the Amid, speaks out. That if you're harvesting, when you're harvesting, then loisa oil. The can, but over here ain't batzid. Why not? Shekolalaniyim. K'maishamart. Keep shame batzid is oilolais minayin. Keep your finger in the maraful. Okay, so the source of Rabbi Eliezer is from a pasuk in Kiseitz. Amaloi Rabbi Akiva. That hold on, we have a pasuk regarding oilolais in Kedosh. What does the Torah say? Look inside the Torah Oira Shalom. That v'charmecha loisa oilel. So v'charmecha loisa oilel. The Torah is not saying kisiftzor loisa oilel. V'charmecha loisa oilel. No matter what, afilu kola oilelis. Right? It doesn't say don't take off the oilelis those that are in your kedem, or don't take it off from your kedem. It says your kedem. Look inside the manafulda. Now, truth is, each one has to deal with the pasuk of the other. And for some Mishnah, for some reason, the Mishnah is only going to challenge Rabbi Akiva with the pasuk of Rabbi Eliezer and not the other way around. The Gemara will do that. The Gemara will finalize this back and forth. But says the Gemara, Im Kain, okay, I get you, Rabbi Akiva, you're right. From the pasuk in Kedoshim, we don't have any indication that only kisivtzah, then loisa oil. It's like a mashma, loisa oil, regardless. However, in Kain, what would you do the pasuk in Kiseitze? To which Rabbi Akiva responds, or the Mishnah responds on behalf of Rabbi Akiva. Listen to this. This is a very important additional topic that we will see in the Gemara that all of the Tanoim subscribe to. That ein lo aniyim ba'oilus koydem labatz. That even according to Rabbi Akiva, that holds that even in this case, all of it is la'aniyim. And regardless, in all cases, the din is that the only time the aniyim have the right to go into the field to actually take the oiloless, only when it is the time of harvest. Now, if you have, in the normal case, in the same kedem, both developed clusters and underdeveloped clusters, the time of the batzid is measured when the owner is harvesting his field, those that are not oiloless. In the case in our Mishnah, where this field is kuloi oiloless, so the koydem labatzin means when people in the region, when the neighboring karamim, they're going to be harvested. Point is that even though the owner has no right in the oiloless, it's not his, neither is it the aniyim's. He may not take it. But when can the ani actually go and take it? Only when there is the batzin, and that's the meeting in Kiseitze Kisif. So again, this field, the owner and his keren, or even if there's nothing, when the chevra are doing the harvest, then loisa oil, meaning then lagel layosam velamon. That's gavaldik. Okay. Says the Gemara, we're focusing on Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, kedem, that's kula oiloless labalabayis. What about Petit? What about Petit? Same concept. In other words, the field had such a poor harvest that the few little grapes that were there, when he attempted to harvest his field, they all fell on the ground. Now, we learned before that, what do I mean, they all? Isn't it more than 3? If more than 3 or more fall, is it labalabais? Yeah, we said before that 3 or more labalabais if they fell at the same time. If one falls and then another falls and then another falls and then another falls, even if it's many, many more than 3, as long as they didn't fall all together, that is petit. They fell individual grapes. So what will happen if the harvest was so poor that all you have is petit? Says the Gemara the same thing. That the Kavah say that im ain't batzid. If all you have is petit, so then the aniyim don't have any ownership in it. Also because of the same words, ki sipsoir karmecha. So we say, ein batzet, ein peret. Look inside the Marafulda. Ude kavase is not a kasha. Benichusa. The Gemara is making a statement that im ein batzet, ein nami peret al Rabbi Eliezer. The pasuk that ki sipsoir karmecha loisa oil lacharecha. The pasuk, the source of Rabbi Eliezer, doesn't even use the word peret. It's only speaking about oilolus. You're right. Says the Marafulda that the peret va'oilolus yalfinim adadi. We compare one to the other. It says the Gemara further. You're telling me that what? That in order for the aniyim to have the right to take the oilolus, there has to be the developed clusters remaining. For the balabayas, adds the Gemara another gavalika detail. Don't limit this only to the actual moment of harvest, in which Rabbi Eliezer says, if you have proper clusters, then leave the oilolus for the aniyim. What happens if you had it then? There were developed clusters, and you harvested it for you. But what were to happen, David, if immediately after, I don't know how to define immediately in halach, like what, that's a big kasha that the Mishnah normally doesn't speak about. Immediate, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever that share is. If immediately after you harvested the developed clusters, a chaya came, just as an example, and ate up all of your clusters, so de facto, right now, you only have the oilolus. Here also, Rabbi Eliezer says the aniyim cannot take it. That you have to have that which you harvested for yourself remaining on the side after you harvested it. But if they were both good and underdeveloped. So right? You harvested the good, but right away the animals ate it up. As an example, stole it, then even here, Rabbi Eliezer will hold the aniyim don't have the oilolus. Loi. Wow. Look inside the Marafulda. It's mamish min a amid. Masha'en came, but in contrast, if after you harvested, you put it on the side, there is nothing left right away. So the words bitzad doesn't mean on the side of. Bitzad means samuch lebatzet. You have to have, after you harvested, there still has to be the harvest. It's like incoming accounts. When you have a lot of outgoing expenses, that's how many people feel. Money in, money out. It's farm garnish. Has to be that epis blight for a certain amount of time. Okay. The Gemara is not going to define how much time, but the Gemara is going to go back and ask you a question. Hold on a second. The Mishnah's case is that there's only oilolus. Does that mean that there isn't a single cluster? And if there's one cluster and there's a million oilolus, the aniyim get it? Also not. When Rabbi Eliezer is saying that in order for the aniyim to have a schus and the oilolus, there has to be some harvest, there is a minimum that has to remain for the balabas. That's something the Mishnah didn't mention, but the Gemara takes it for a given, and the question is already, what is that minimum? The kamahu batz. So the Beit Shila Amri, in the Yeshiva of Shila, they said, Shloisha eshkoilois. First of all, it has to do with quantity and with quality. Quantity means from the whole kerem, at least 3. And the quality would mean that those 3 all together have to produce at least a revis. And if you don't have that, then that's the case of the Mishnah Kerem Shekola Oilus.
Why is it not a percentage?
It's amazing. No, that's the whole chiddush. Very good, beautiful.
You still have a million.
I'm not answering David's question. I'm saying, yeah, I got it. You got it. No, there's a chiddush here. First of all, the chiddush could be that when you read the Mishnah, you might have thought if there's only one. The Mishnah says there's only oilus. So the given is there has to be something substantial. So you would have thought substantial is ratio, whatever it is. Machadish devei shila, not a ratio. Okay. Says the Gemara. And then we spoke this out on the Mishnah. See, the Mishnah was great with Rabbi Akiva, right? You have 2 psukim. Rabbi Akiva is the one that bases himself on Parshas Kedoshim. So they asked Rabbi Akiva, what do you do with the Parshas Parshas Kiseitze? So he answered, but what about Rabbi Eliezer's challenge from the pasuk of Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah explained how Rabbi Akiva works out both psukim. So now the Gemara is asking, Uma, the Rabbi Eliezer, what does Rabbi Eliezer do with v'char mecholei so'oilo? And I want you to know that there's really two questions here. There is a question that the Gemara will answer, and there's a question that the Gemara won't answer. The question that the Gemara will answer is, what does Rabbi Eliezer do with the Kedoshim pasuk? The question is, why didn't the Mishnah address that? Okay, that the Gemara is not speaking about. So answers the Gemara. Here we go. That shaloi toimar. It says v'char macha loy sa'oilel. Right, that's what we are focusing on. Shaloi toimar choyel ve'ein laniyim ba'oilel eskoyim lebatzin. In the very case of Rabbi Eliezer, that holds that what? That if kuloi oileless, Rabbi Eliezer says it belongs to the balabayis. What happens if there isn't kuloi? It belongs to the aniyim. So hoyel ve'ein lo aniyim ba'oileless koyim lo batzer. You have to have batzer. So my question is, will the balabayis have a right in the oileless prior to the batzer? Li Rabbi Akiva. What does Rabbi Akiva hold? Rabbi Akiva holds that even if it's all oileless, who does it belong to? La'aniyim. So what makes it property of the aniyim? The fact that it is a underdeveloped cluster. But Rabbi Eliezer, it's not enough. It's not enough that it should be an underdeveloped cluster. There has to be something remaining for the balabas. We learned the minimum, but it's not just something remaining. When the balabas is harvesting that which is his, then, which is why if there's nothing to harvest, it doesn't go to the name. So then you would think, hold on, maybe prior to his harvest, it's bechlal not the aniyos. Can he go to his kerem and nash off the oileless? He's not harvesting it. He didn't begin the harvest. It's the harvesting that triggers the obligation to leave the oileless. He didn't do that yet. The owner. In other words, you would argue, according to Rabbi Akiva, you wouldn't think so. Because since Rabbi Akiva says that no matter what, the oileless belongs to the aniyim, even though the aniyim don't have the right to take it prior to the harvest, but it's theirs. So then it makes more sense. If it's theirs, the owner cannot take it. No one can take it. But since Rabbi Eliezer holds, it's not just because it's underdeveloped that it belongs to the aniyim. The owner has to harvest. And that's why if there's nothing to harvest, it doesn't go to the aniyim. So maybe it's not aniyim's at all. Maybe the balabas can take it. L'fum came. The pasuk in Kedoshim means that no matter what, it's amazing. The owner may never take the oileless. The owner may never take the oileless. Look inside the Panei Moshe, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. The Sham over there in Kedoshim lehuskad batzer. That's why the Torah doesn't mention chisivtzoy. It just says v'char mecholei soil. Loimer loch to tell you, the second to last line. The lo'oila abalabayis eni yochel liskois bahen. Now you're right. When can the ani take it? Only during the time of the batzer. I get it. Only during the time of the batzer. So, but it's not never the balabas cannot take it. Eli yiskayim wachi yaschel livsoir shiur batzer. But the balabas is not allowed to take it, and for that you have to have a pasuk that speaks about the mitzvah of leaving the oileless without using the word batzer. Not that the ani can take it, that the balabas cannot take it. Beautiful.
It's almost like Rabbi Eliezer hears what Rabbi Akiva's reasoning is.
Oh, let's go right. Next Mishnah. Now this next Mishnah is going to continue with the din of oileless, and it's going to go to shikha. 2 different din. Din number 1. Hamagdish es kanwei. A person consecrated this field. So like this. If the oileless are not yet discerned that they will be oileless, in other words, at some point, if you have to be a person who lives in this world. At a very early point, you can already discern which cluster will be developed, even though nothing is, and which ones will never get developed. If you are magdish it before that point, you don't know yet. So then the din is, we say, ein ha'oilolus la'aniyim. Wow. Ein ha'oilolus la'aniyim. Look inside the Rash. Let's learn some Rash Adilio. The left line, 5 lines before the bottom. Everyone's opinion. Yeah. Ein ha'oilolis la'aniyim, says the Rash Adilio, because the Hegdish Kadam, because we view the oiloless being oiloless, not when God knows it's going to be oiloless, but when there's already a physical manifestation that it's not developing, and it will never develop. Prior to that, it's nothing. A field of Hegdish doesn't have to leave oiloless. Now, if it was already oiloless, just because you were magdish it, you can't take it away from the aniyim. So we're making this as the cutoff point. That Ein Ois Laniyim says that Ashir Elio the Hegdish Kadam Upater HaKerem oiloless. Now, what's the source that a kerem of Hegdish is exempt from leaving oiloless? Because the Torah uses the words karmecha, yours, not God's. Keep your finger in that Asher Eli, because we're going to learn the other one also. However, in contrast, the Mishnah speaks it out clearly. But if you were magdish it after it was already discernible that those will become oiloless, so then, even though we learned in the previous Mishnah, the aniyim can only take it b'shas batzer. Doesn't matter. But we also learned in the Gemara, you see the hemshech, how the Gemara fits in, that according to everyone, even though the aniyim can only take it during the time of the harvest, it's already designated from the aniyim. From when? From when it's discernible that it's oiloless. The owner cannot take it, cannot nashof it. He cannot destroy it. It's not his anymore. In other words, it already belongs to the aniyim. So it remains to the aniyim. Once the oiloless emerge, guys, they become property of the poor and not of the owner, So how can the owner be mad to something that does not belong to him? Now, even again, the aniyim cannot harvest it. You have to separate. The aniyim can only harvest it during the time of the harvest. But it already belongs to the aniyim. That was the last piece of the Gemara. Look inside that Asher Eliyahu. 4 lines from the bottom now. Ha'oiloless la'aniyim. Now, there's another detail. Now, this other detail, one second, this other detail is a machlokes tanoim. I want to finish out. What's the next case? Now that we established this, that the oiloless belong to the aniyim. Hold on. The aniyim have their oiloless on a field of Hegdish. It's getting nourished from the field of Hegdish. So even though it belongs to them, and that will be a big topic in the Gemara, you can argue, how can it even belong to them? It belongs to them. Do they have to pay to the temple treasurer some financial restitution, some financial payment for the fact that they were yoinik off a stay hegdish? Also not. That's what he wants to add. Now that's a machlokes tanoim that the Tanakama holds that not only does it belong to the aniyim, everyone holds that, but the ein nois neschar gedulum lahegdish. You don't even have to give it to hegdish. Okay, and it will lead the way. I know that it will be nice to read the Rash Adilio. We're going to get to it, God willing, when we get to the Gemara. But this line is important because ha'oiloless laniyim is not subject to an argument. We're going to go. Tanakama holds. You have to remember ha'oiloless laniyim, and you don't even have to pay. The aniyim don't have to pay. Now, by the way, the aniyim don't have money to pay. They can pay it from the oiloless. They don't have to do that. Before you ask your question, now Daf Samach Vava Midbeis. On this last detail, Rabbi Yossi Omer, yes, the oiloless belongs to the aniyim because you were magdished after they were discernible. Aber they're growing more. They're growing from a kerem of hegdish. So yitnu schar gidulim lahegdish. The question is, you have to make restitution. That was the word that I was losing. Why is that? Why is that? That makes sense, right? How do you explain the Tanakama? How do you explain the Tanakama?
In general, if you magdish something, forget that it's all of us. The poor takes.
The magdish kerem b'kar mocha loisa oilo. All of these matnas aniyim is only if it belongs to a private citizen, not if it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. That's a given.
That's what happens with all the stuff that's for the Beis Hamikdash. It stays for the Beis Hamikdash.
Sure.
Or don't get anything.
No, but in this case, since you were magdish it after the oiloless were discernible, and even though the aniyim had no right to take it, the aniyim had ownership in it. Which aniyim, we don't know. Doesn't matter. It doesn't belong to the owner. That was the end of the Gemara before. The owner may not, even as a nash, the owner cannot take it. I cannot be magdish something that doesn't belong to me. So the fact that the oiloless that will continuously grow, even though it's going to be underdeveloped, but they're continuously growing. It belongs to the aniyim. That's a given. Rabbi Yossi, who says they have to give money, makes sense. They grew off Hegdish. How do you understand the Tanakama? That's the hardship. How can the Tanakama say you don't even have to give money to the Hegdish? And the word will be that just like the oilers themselves belong to the aniyim prior to the consecration, so therefore the owner didn't own it to consecrate it, God does not allow the aniyim to pick it before the time of the batzah. God does not allow that to happen. Which means the aniyim don't only own the oilers when they're little, since they have to wait until later. The aniyim already own the right of it getting nourished from the field. The field owes those oilers its sap until when the time of the batzar comes. That's already also belonging to the aniyim. So now, when the owner was magdish it, he cannot be magdish something that doesn't belong to him. He was never magdish the grapes themselves. He was never magdish the future nourishment that they need because God does not allow them to pick it early. That's, you get the Mishnah Zayin and the Mishnah Vav, they got lock and key. Now, what do you want to say? One second. I already held him back for a long time. I'm afraid he forgot.
I'm fine. I was just, this last Mishnah, doesn't it ignore the Rabbi Eliezer who said that sometimes the field doesn't all belong to the...
That's not this case. In other words, let's go like this. In the case where the whole field is oilers, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you're magdish it, then the aniyim have nothing because they wouldn't have had anything anyway. So you were magdish everything that you own. Our Mishnah obviously is speaking about a case where you have Rabbi Eliezer, where you have both. Okay, one second. Kevin, what did you want to ask?
Rabbi, if it's olelot, but it's still growing, at what point does it not become olelot? Does it go back and forth?
So we had this before. Underdeveloped is not the size of the grapes. Oilless, we explained it. The Mishnah explained it. That oilless means that we have a central stem. This happens at a very early stage. From the central stem, ideally, secondary stems come out. And from those stems comes out the grapes. Just take a cluster of grapes that's in your refrigerator. Oilless means that it doesn't have these secondary stems. So therefore, even the part of the vine that's closest to the tree is not going to have shoulders like kotev because there's only a central stem. And also, from the central stem in the bottom, there's a grape that comes at the end. It makes it look like a tail. It's called a native. It's a dripping. That begins to develop early. If none of it is coming out, it won't come out later. You can discern at a very early stage that it won't have loy kotev, loy natef. That was the words of the Mishnah. And yeah, okay. Now,
but you can make the same claim anytime there's a labels that the aniyim need to give schar to the bottom.
Well, I like what Mendel is saying. Mendel is saying that the Tanakama makes so much sense. We have to understand Rabbi Yossi, because the fact that the oilers belongs to the aniyim, like we just said right away, even though, but it belongs to the aniyim, but they're growing off the field of the owner. So let the ani have to pay the owner. No one says that because God gave it to the aniyim. God told the ani you have to wait until a certain point. That means that God gave them the rights in the field until that point. Rabbi Yossi will be hard. I'm very happy. Good. Now we're going to move on to the next. Yes.
It's a good question, but when they're makdish, this is it the product or is it the value?
The magdish, the product, always. When people want to give, one second, the way it works, the way I understand it, the people want to give money to God. I get that, but sometimes people feel. Another detail: the hektish doesn't need your kenim. They need money. They have maintenance. I know it works. And there's a maintenance. They don't need vineyards. They're not. But people sometimes feel that they want to give what they own to God and they want to redeem it. They redeem it. They add a fifth. Let's say the kenim is worth $1 million. A guy wants to give to God $1.2 million, $1.25 million. Excuse me, the chaimish. So some people just give that donation. Some people, they want to dafka, they want to show Hashem. It's not just about the money. What is mine is yours. People have a relationship with their property.
But if they're cutting it off, how's it still going?
How are they cutting it off? Cutting nothing off it.
Okay, the Magdashin and it's still going.
The Magdashin is still going, and the Beis Hamikdash has to now go Okay, right. Now, the Ezoi Shikha, now we're going to another topic. Yeah, I know that oileless and pettit are unique to a kedem. Shikha is not unique to a kedem, but there is shikha on the kedem. Now, we already learned many dafim of shikha. One of the main points of shikha is, the Torah says, loisashul lakachta. Loisashul lakachta implies that when do you have to leave it for the aniyim is you forgot to harvest it during the harvest. You moved on to the point that if when you remember you're going to go back, you are returning. If you didn't yet move on, even though you forgot it for a moment, but you didn't move on yet, you are allowed to take it. What does moving on mean? We already quoted this Mishnah before, and we're going to differentiate between grapes that are more chashuv versus grapes that are less chashuv. Grapes that are less chashuv, moving on would mean you physically moved away from it, even only a step. You moved on, and the Torah says, don't go back. Grapes that are more chashuv, as will be defined in the Mishnah, only if it's outside of your arm's reach is it considered that you moved on. If it's within your arm's reach, even though it's behind you, but you can stand where you are and lean back and take it, you didn't leave it yet. Something that's more chashuv is something from which it's harder to move away from legally. Makes a lot of sense. Something that's less chashuv, it's very easy to move away from. So the definition of you moving on isn't only your intent. It isn't only how long did you forget. It's about there's an objective link connected to the chashivos. Now, we already had other such concepts that if the tree itself has a special, unique, something that makes it discernible. Remember, that's kol zayis, that the olive tree, the olives, then you can never forget. It's the same concept, but not the same concept. Okay, let's read it inside. It depends. If you have an otis, a trellised vines, that means that you don't allow for the vines to be laying on the ground. That's something that you only do if the grapes are lesser of importance to you. Almost all the vineyards that you visited, people build these wooden trellises, and the grapes go through it, the grapes go over it, right? Which is when you think about if Kevin is going to find a picture, that's the only thing you're going to find. I never saw, not that I went, a few vineyards that I went, someone convinced me over here, someone's wife convinced my wife to go to Italy, to schlep for 8 hours, to go have a little piece of pasta and to pay her $500 in a vineyard. So I saw a vineyard. You're welcome. Okay, so Ba'aris, in the case of trellis vines, moving away means moving away. You went so far away that it's outside your arm's reach. Then the Torah says, but if it's not outside your arm's reach, even though you walked away from it, it's behind you, then you didn't move away yet. Because there is a link that we have to something that is of importance. But if they are laying, regel means foot, means laying on the ground, means they're lesser importance. Could be. It's again, everything is objective, subjective. Lesser importance is determined by the owner. The owner didn't make the effort to put it on a trellis. That for him is so insignificant that the moment he forgot to harvest a psak cluster and he stepped away, mishayavar mimenu, even though it is within your arm's reach, then the Torah tells you, okay. Now, Chevra and Daf and Mesechus Pesachim in the Bavli and Daf Nun Hamid Beis, there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah writes that Shisha Devarim Oshu Anse Yerichai. I want you to know that Chasidus brings a lot. One of the 6, which we're not going to discuss here, and that is that they were Koirchen al Shema. Koirchen al Shema, they were the ones that did not say Baruch Shem Kvei Malchus Elohim Bod. And Chasidus actually explains about Yerichai, Reyach. They were very spiritual people. We learn about Yechud Ilah, Yechud Tata, that they did not have Yechud Tata. Now, for people like us, to think that we don't have Yechud Tata, we are delusional. We need to have a Baruch Shem. We don't live in Yechud Ilah. Halavai, a couple of moments in our life. Okay, but we're not talking about that. So the Mishnah said they did 6 things that were different. For 3 of the 6, the Chachamim were moicha. 3 of the 6, the Chachamim were not moicha. Not moicha doesn't mean that they were excited. At least they were not moicha. Then the Mishnah enumerates them. The first of the 3 that the Chachamim were against were the words Matirin Begamziyoy Shel Hegdish. So we spoke it out. Let's repeat this. There was a time, and the Gemara will tell you why, and that will be the why is so important because you have to understand how it came to be the way it was. There was a time that people in Yerichai collectively were magdish their carob and their sycamore trees to the Beis Hamikdash. These are very expensive trees. These are trees that are pruned once in 7 years. It's done in order to make that which remains even better. Case there was is that they pruned the trees. Atkan, they can keep the sheathings. I don't know what you call these pieces of wood. They can keep it. They were magdish it. 7 years later, the trees belonged to Hegdish. They pruned it again, which was to the benefit of Hegdish, but they used the gamziyos of Hegdish. They used the branches for themselves.
You used it for what?
For in L'chayda, Hegdish.
Themselves.
They use it for themselves.
The
We're going to view the branches of the carob and the sycamore trees like the peiros that comes out from a tree because it's residual. If a person is magdish, let's go. I want to get already a couple of. If a person is magdish explicitly, the tree and the future produce, of course, the tree and the future produce belongs to Hegdish, and using it is me'ilah b'Hegdish. If a person retains the rights to the fruits, all they do is they are magdish the tree itself. We're going now with the logic of Rabbi Yossi, which is Mendel was saying makes so much sense. They can have the fruits later, because when they kept for themselves the fruits, they also retained for themselves the type of nourishment that the fruits will need from the tree. L'chatchila, they kept it for themselves. That's the chapir. So on one hand, we say geduli hegdish hegdish. We are going now with the logic is that if you explicitly kept for yourself some of the peiros, even though it's growing out of hegdish, from the outset, you didn't only keep for yourself the peiros, you kept for yourself the nourishment that it needs was also kept for yourself. Now we're good. Now the question over there is that they were matidin the gamziyah shel hegdish, and omrum chachamim ein atem moedim lanu begduli hegdish ein asurim. What are you doing? In other words, they felt that in lechatchila it was mugdash.
The consecrated the tree with the.
They never spoke that out.
The fruit.
The fruit would be the additional branches that grows between prunings. They never mentioned it. The question that the Chachamim had is it not automatically included unless you explicitly exclude it? So answer, so Amru Lahem, so the Anshe Yerichai said that in our scenario, if you know why they were Magdashit, right, context is relevant here. Why were they Magdashit? This is what happened. They only were Magdash the tree itself, not the gamziyas that would subsequently grow every 7 years. Why is that? Because why were they Magdashit? We know why they were Magdashit. There were ruffians, there were bullies that came to Yerichai. Look at Yerichai today, filled with chayas rois. So these guys, they were going to steal the trees. At those days, the ruffians respected Hegdish. So the Anshe Yerichai felt they're going to steal it from us anyways. They're going to steal it from us. Let's be Magdish it. Now these bandits, they didn't want the branches. The real value of a charov and a sycamore are the trunks because you have real beams that you can make from it. The branches that you shear off during the pruning is not good enough for that. So the whole reason why they were magdashit, because of mafioso people, and in order for that not to happen, it's almost as if they said, if we're not going to get it, you're not going to get it. They never had in mind to consecrate the branches because the Bali Egreif never needed the branches. So even though they never explicitly excluded the branches, halachically we are allowed to presume that they excluded the branches. Now hold on. Umar, Rabban, and Sabran Meimar. What about the Chachamim? Koirois, upeirois. The Chachamim hold now. I know the Gersois makes all the difference in the world. Koirois, upeirois, yes. Higdishum. Or Koiros or Peiros Higdishu. Did the Chachamim hold that they were Magdish both? So the Gemara says no. Like the Chachamim agreed with Anshe Yerichai. They never intended to be Magdish the Peiros. Nevertheless, the reason why Michu Biyadon, they were not happy with the Anshe Yerichai's private usage of the Gamziyos of the branches. Siricha l'Rabbanan, look inside the Marafulda. Let's read the Marafulda. It's like four lines under the Gemara. Afilu teime b'kares beres tzricha l'Rabbanan, which means la'asran miyas midrabbanan, that the Chachamim rabbinically prohibited it. They agree only midrabbanan. And why? Look inside. The Chem Masik Bebabli, right? The Mishnah we said is on Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis, but the Gemara that's expounding this part is on Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis. The Rabbanan lo yasri lo el midrabbanan, the lo yasi li ichlufei nami b'shar hekdesh tam. It's when a person is tam magdish without explicitly excluding the future produce, all of it is hegdish. Really, here there was no need to exclude it because it was known that they're being magdish it because of the mafioso people that lived in Yerichai. When it's known, you don't have to explicitly exclude it. But people then, in the many next generations, saw that Anshe Yerichai, they were very holy people, the Yidden that lived there. They were using the Gamziyos. So exactly, people might misunderstand that to mean that even if you don't explicitly exclude it, you get to keep the peiros. Stam, you don't get to keep the peiros. So midrabanan, they made an isur. That's the way the Gemara understands it. Now let's chaparan and let's go back. You see how it's so linked to the Mishnah. All of this I understand is connected to Rabbi Yosef, because the kasha would be again, even if you did not consecrate it, even if you didn't consecrate it, it's growing off hegdish. Yes, it is, but no, it's not. You see that Rabbi Yossi says that the fakert. I'm sorry, man. The Tanakama, the Tanakama. You see a concept that you don't even have to give this chad. Now, hold on. Hamagdish te'ilan. Let's clarify this. If a person consecrates a steilan means you have 3 trees or more, and it's considered automatically a sada. Do we say without any clarity from the consecrator? Did he keep the future peiros or not? So the Gemara says, Nishmeina min Adam. Let's learn this from our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? That Misha noidu hoy leilois, that if you consecrated it after the leilos are already discernible, it wasn't yours to consecrate. Hoy leilos laniem. Hoy leilos laniem. And look inside the Marafulda, Shma'in and Mina, the end of the Amid, Ein mi'ila b'gedulin. Now hold on a second. The Havamina was, guys, that when you're Magdish a Kedem, you were Magdish none of the fruits. None of the fruits. The fruits are growing off the field. There's no Me'ila B'Gedul. The Eshkoilois, if you were not Magdish any of the fruits, then why did our Mishnah say the Oilelis is to Daniyam? You know what the Mishnah should have said? And the Eshkoilois that were discernible should be to the Balabas. Now I get it. Midoy Raisa is, but now we brought the Mishnah Psachim, we can learn that way. Only Midrabanan it's not. Only Midrabanan it's not. Midoy Raisa, unless we know that you consecrated the fruits, you get to keep the fruits. Midrabanan, we don't do that.
You only don't keep the branches.
Branches and the fruits are the same. No. The branches of the Charuv and the Sycamore are like fruits. In other words, based on now that we brought to the Sugyam Psachim, really, we're deviating a little bit. The Gemara will make a correction. But you see the link. So, says the Gemara, you're wrong. No. Our Mishnah proves nothing. Basically, when you're Magdish a field, not in the case of Yerichai, again, there's context there. Without that, we are going to say that you're Magdish everything that's on it. And in our Mishnah, the owners don't get to keep the developed clusters because they were Magdish it, even though they never specified. Why are the Oilelos La'aniyim? Because it never belonged to the owner at this point. From when it's discernible, it's not his. Shanya, Oilelos is different. I want to go. I know it's late. Let's go to the Samach Zayin. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, if you cannot be magdish something that's not yours, why is the Mishnah speaking only about the time where the oilers were discernible? Why would we not say if they began to bud and you were magdish the field, and it's not yet discernible. Why don't we even say over there that the oil shall be to the aniyim? Because it was not yours. So answers the Gemara, Shanya he, because it wasn't aniyim's yet. She kerem hegdish. In other words, kahadod the tani hanoiteya kerem lahegdish. If you plant a vineyard, if it belongs to hegdish, everything that grows from a field of hegdish is considered hegdish. In the context of it's going to be the only thing will be chayiv is in shvius. So what we see is that if something grows out of the vineyard of hegdish, it's exempt from oiloless. If you were magdish it before it was discernible, it's not oiloless yet. And if it's not oiloless yet, it will never be oiloless, the way we explained the Mishnah. Bottom line is that when you're magdish a kerem or stay ilon, or these types of trees that have peiros in their branches, because you prune them, they're very expensive branches, they're chashav and they grow every couple of years. If you don't specify that you're keeping back for yourself the peiros, you are consecrating the field and the peiros. Case of Yericha was an exception, because what motivated them was only to save it from the Bali Egrith. And for that, you didn't have to consecrate the peiros. In our Mishnah, you consecrated everything. The eshkoilos will not belong to you. The oiloless, once they are discernible, are not yours anymore, which is why you could not have consecrated them. Fact that the growing off the hegdish kerem does not create a problem in Me'ilah. The only question is, are you chayiv to pay the money? Are you chayiv to pay the money? That's the machlokes.